What are the limits of storytelling? Does it have to do with the individual ability of an author, director, or musician? Well, that no doubt plays a part, but it also comes down to the medium you choose to tell your story in. For example, back when our history was entirely oral, the limits were pretty clear. Things like word choice and intonation were paramount because you really didn't have much more than that to get your audience invested in and remember your story. Nowadays, though, the audiences are bigger than ever, and the number of stories out there has increased exponentially with the advent of new mediums, new ways to tell those stories, each of which come with their own advantages and drawbacks. Anime is no different, but it's this art form in particular where I think you find unique, exciting, heartfelt, and sometimes outright odd yarns being spun at a rate few other mediums seem content to match. Anime dares to be different, and that deserves to be praised. So join me as we discuss this diverse and occasionally bizarre medium we love. But before I go any further, I just want to clarify that I'm not trying to outright say anime is a superior medium to film, music, books, or anything based on what I'm talking about with this video. Like with any form of entertainment, it has its cliches and tropes that even the best of stories can slip into. Anime is weird. Anybody who stays on this ride long enough will learn that sooner or later. But I wanted to take a look at the diversity present in anime because I think it's key to understanding the medium at large. Because certainly if you're a newcomer, it's easy to just group everything together, say it's a genre, and call it a day. And I get where that tendency comes from, especially if you're only exposed to explosively popular shows like Dragon Ball, One Punch Man, Attack on Titan, etc., shows that break into more mainstream content to the point of where you're at least aware of their existence, whether or not you've actually watched it. But seeing how it takes a certain kind of show to clear that hurdle in the first place, it's easy to only see one piece of the anime pie. One Piece might also be a show you've heard of. And if that is the case for you, I highly encourage just watching an episode or two of something like Spice and Wolf or Shirobako, and try to find a comparison between those stories and something like Dragon Ball Super that isn't, they're both animated. But if you have seen more than a handful of anime, then I'm probably just preaching to the choir. Like so many of us, you have been exposed to the truly unique stories this medium makes possible. Narratives that don't rely on those heavy action set pieces and instead choose to focus on something as mundane as an office job, or as deep as depression. And it's not like they are any less anime for doing so, it's just that Japan has already cleared the hurdle the West is still largely facing in terms of animation, breaking away from comedy. There have already been some good videos made on this topic, and I'll try to hunt them down for the description, but to summarize, if you think about most Western cartoons, but especially if it's aimed at adults, it's guaranteed to be primarily a comedy. The Simpsons, Family Guy, South Park, Archer, Bob's Burgers, Rick and Morty, and so on. It seems as though Western companies believe that animation, at least on television, needs to be comedic if it's aimed at an even slightly older demographic. And I get why to an extent. The animated format allows for things like ridiculous gags, set pieces, situations, and exaggerations that just aren't practical for live action. But there is also the stigma that cartoons are for kids and therefore have to be inherently silly. Maybe corporate heads just think that nobody would take a serious animated TV show, well, seriously. Audiences may just ask, what's the point? Why is this even animated? Which I think are somewhat fair questions to ask when you're outside looking in. What do you add by making something like The Good Wife or CSI Miami animated? If you're not gonna do ridiculous cutaways, over-the-top reactions, or brutal slapstick humor, then what is the point? Well, the answer to that question could be a video in its own right, and maybe it will be eventually, but for now I'll say that there is more animation can add to a story than just zaniness or exotic set pieces. For an example, let's focus back in on anime. There are plenty of shows that can fall into this hypothetical what's the point category. At first glance, there's no reason New Game, a slice-of-life comedy series about a bunch of young women working in the video game industry, couldn't be done in live action. The only box from earlier that it might check is the over-the-top reactions. But take those away and you're still left with the show I mentioned earlier, Shirobako. And while far from identical, the setting for both is basically just one office, and characters tend to act how adults typically would. There isn't much from either I could pull out and label as stereotypical anime in the eyes of most people. And yet, I can't help but feel like I'd never give either of these shows the time of day if they were presented in a live-action format. I think animation, and in particular anime, if done right, can add a degree of charm to the product that really can't be replicated outside the medium. And I'd say on some level it's because anime asks, why can't this be animated? If a story is being told, as long as it stays intact, isn't that reason enough to at least try? And that's something that, as I've watched more anime, I've realized, as a medium, it never lets its animated nature dictate the stories being told. Yes, studios will use said animation to enhance the story however they see fit, but it will always depend on what kind of narrative they want to tell. I.e., Studio 3Hertz's idea of enhancing flip-flappers through animation is worlds away from how they chose to bolster Princess Principal. Same goes with Studio Bones and Shirobako versus Ouran High School Host Club, and so on. The story is always paramount, and the animation is just a vehicle for it. Studios don't think they need to hit any set number of requirements just because they chose to tell their story in this medium, and so as a result, there isn't much discrimination in regards to what kind of narratives are translated to anime. This, I'd argue, is at least partially responsible for the diversity of storytelling present within the medium that I mentioned at the outset of this video. The fact that, beyond a few tropes, there really isn't any clear-cut template, no exact formula for a new show to follow. The result is anime producing, on average, more unique stories than other more typical visual mediums. Now, I'm not saying that guarantees those shows will be at all good, but I'd rather watch something that's at least trying to be different and fail than something that's just painfully generic and uninspired. For example, I can't think of a mainstream medium that would feature a cast of just two girls wandering the post-apocalypse, living their lives, and have it work as well as it does. You try to pitch that kind of show to anybody in Hollywood, and they'll either want to add zombies or some noble quest to undo said apocalypse. If they don't laugh you out of the elevator first, that is. Same goes for one of my favorite series, Demi-chan. Call me crazy, but I don't see that translating into live action without coming across as incredibly preachy or campy. And don't even get me started on something like Maid Dragon or Keijo. These kind of ridiculous ideas are things you will only frequently see in anime, manga, or light novels. To find their equivalents in other mediums, you would probably have to spend hours scouring a local bookstore or drive 50 miles to a small theater playing that one indie movie that will only be on that one day in December at noon on a Tuesday. And this is assuming you are even aware of those gems in the first place. If you want to watch a bizarre-ass anime though, odds are you only need to look in one of a few places. And if all else fails, there's always more contemptible means that'll get the job done. You also don't really need to be aware of any gems to find something that's pretty out there in this medium. I told you that anime is weird, and it is. It has its flaws, sure, but so does any medium, and I still find it an incredibly interesting one that has grabbed hold of me, and hopefully you if you're watching this. The beauty though, at least I think, comes from the fact that anime is capable of telling a truly wide range of stories. Anime doesn't limit itself to one genre, art style, or demographic. And if you threw 2 darts at Crunchyroll's catalog, I'm willing to bet you're gonna hit shows that are more diverse than if you did the same to your TV Guide or Fandango app. Certainly you're going to at least find more odd and unique entries. And again, I'm not trying to hold up anime as some golden child that is clearly superior to all other forms of entertainment. I just think we should recognize and appreciate the deep, weird, silly, and simple stories the medium graces us with. Understanding that anime is different, but that's exactly why we love it. Well, that's been my analysis, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. What's the most tame anime you've watched? How about the weirdest? Do you ever think about the diversity present in the medium, or do you disagree with me? Whatever your thoughts are, you can let me know down below. Thank you as always for watching, and an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons PenguinPandaZero, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, James Morton, and everyone else for generously supporting me. If you want to support me and make more videos like this possible, you can click on the right to visit my Patreon page, you can click the left to subscribe, in the middle to watch more of my content. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.